pleasure to go now to the next subject, which is Rhoda's work on biomarker. And in fact, when we just had the AIC conference on Alzheimer in San Diego, and I was really happy to see that the subject of biomarkers becomes almost at the center of our research, and that we're speaking about biomarker-based development, biomarker-based even approval, and that we speak about biomarkers as potentially being able, and this is extremely important, to identify people at risk. Because as I said at the beginning, we want to prevent this irreversible damage of the brain, and this is only possible if we can diagnose the disease early. So one of the top and world experts is Rhoda, and she will help us to look into biomarker, and she corrected me. She said it's precision brain health, not precision medicine, and I took this into my wording. And in particular, she will speak about the future, which is digital technology and what it can contribute to get faster, potentially better, cheaper to the right diagnosis in the right patient population, with the right drug to hopefully go for prevention. Rhoda is a professor at Boston University School of Medicine and Public Health. She's a co-PI and director of the Framingham Heart Study Brain Aging, and we are learning on a daily level from that study. And she's director of the global cohorts at the Davos Alzheimer Collaborative, which is another initiative which I believe in the Alzheimer field is unique. And maybe if you have a bit of time, we can speak briefly about it. But what is extremely important is that we create this cohorts, which allows us to look at diversity, at longitudinal effects, etc., etc. So, Rhoda, thank you for joining us. So maybe because it's not necessarily a scientific audience, you could explain to the audience what you mean by precision brain health, biomarkers, and in particular digital biomarkers, and how these digital biomarkers can help us to accelerate actually treatment and prevention in Alzheimer.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. So maybe I'll just step back for a second and just point out that biomarkers in general it's a term that is tied to disease. And that is currently driven by this medical model where there's this focus on precision medicine. And that's really where I think a lot of what's happening in the digital biomarker realm is also adhering to. Now we want to contrast that with precision brain health, which I think is really about monitoring and intervening across the entire spectrum of normal to disease. And it's really focused on optimizing one's brain capacity, regardless of where one falls on that continuum. So rather than finding the right treatment for the right person at the right time to treat or cure a disease, it's really about finding the right solution for the right person at the right time, and includes keeping a person within their current state, even when within that realm of normal. So that's just to give some framework as we're thinking about the concept of precision brain health and where I think digital biomarkers might fit in.
Thank you. So where do we stand today in terms of digital biomarkers, and what prevents us from implementing them much faster than we do?
Sure. I mean, I would say that right now, what we're doing in the digital biomarker realm is relatively modest compared to what it could be. So for example, we're largely centered on active engagement technologies, and I would say we're staying within our comfort zone of what we're familiar with. But technology is really supposed to be doing more than just a better version of what we're already doing. It's really supposed to take us to where we've never been. So in the realm of the current state of the science, we've been having amazing advances in the realm of AD biomarkers, with the amyloid tau and neurodegenerative biomarkers, and moving from increasingly scalable possibilities, with now this emergence of regulator-approved plasma biomarkers, which is really bringing the possibility of AD pathological detection to the realm of routine clinical health exams. But neuropathological studies have told us that having the pathology is really not sufficient for clinical expression of the disease. And there's actually scores of people that live their life, seemingly cognitively intact, despite having pathology in their brain. So where I believe digital technologies are really going to take us, and particularly digital biomarkers, is into the determination of who is showing risk for clinically expressed disease versus clinically silent disease. And a digital biomarker of AD that represents clinical expression at its earliest stages is when all the emerging interventions will be most effective, is really where I think is the holy grail of what digital technologies should be enabling within this AD space. And so anyways, but I do think that, to the question of, so we have these technologies out there, why is the progress really moving at such a slow pace? And I think that there's really three primary barriers. So first is this adherence to the past, that, that's what much of what is called digital biomarkers today largely looks like. And it's what we already do. And we're using it to mimic and enhance, and that is perpetuating research through our peer review system, where precedent is really required to pass muster. And, the other problem is our regulatory system, in terms of bringing things to commercial market, requires approval. So in the US, all digital tech companies are really following this path of approval and those gold standards, which were developed on old tried and true methods. So these two issues are leading to what I think is a third barrier, which is the lack of investment appetite for anything that doesn't hold up to either of these two mechanisms, these yardsticks.
Right.
So I think I actually would encourage us to look to the space exploration community for how do we now set up a roadmap for putting a vision beyond what is in our sights, establishing a safe harbor for failure with the knowledge that the path to success is actually through lots of lack of success, and then on making bold investments that will support both the effort and time it's going to take to get there. It's actually going to cost us more and take more time to get to this future vision of digital biomarkers that will eventually be low cost and time efficient.
Mm-hmm. In fact, this was exactly one of my questions. What has to happen on the regulatory side in order to move this together? How does industry, academia, regulators have to work together to get the acceptance and potentially also the approval? This was really, for me, this is one of the key questions, because without that path, we will not get the money, we will not find investors to support what needs to be done. This is exactly one of my major concerns. Speaking about concerns, so when it comes to critical privacy, bioethical issues, how do we deal with them today? How can we sort of make sure that the people feel comfortable?
Sure. I mean, just in research in general, obviously privacy and ethical considerations are pretty much always the most important issue that we have to address first and foremost. And I think in the digital realm, what we've seen, we hear about repeated breaches of, information within the research space. Certainly digital technologies right now are adhering to what, HIPAA compliant thresholds, and many of them embed encryption across, the data acquisition pipeline to make sure that no meaningful information is garnered in the event of a, possible data breach. But I do think moving forward, in terms of reaching this objective of accurate detection and monitoring of at-risk symptoms, the current privacy confidentiality methods are probably not going to be sufficient to really meet, these ethical moral standards, which should be a higher bar and is a higher bar than just legal standards. So for me, the vision is to have a personalized monitoring intranet of sorts that provides only information to the person. And that there are information sharing tools that are robust enough that the person can actually pick and choose what of their information is shared and with whom. So, today blockchain technology shows promise, I think, for enhanced data security that could apply in the research setting. In the future, I personally tend to look to both the financial industry as well as the military, because they're continuously producing privacy security solutions for digital that could be applied in this context. Actually, I discovered blockchain through a fintech conference, which was actually in Hong Kong. So, and I think what's happening in the cryptocurrency world is something that I follow with interest, because I think that there are some solutions embedded in there to maximize privacy for the individual. And I think we need to pay close attention to those possibilities.
Yeah, so if we sort of overcome some of these issues, which are really issues, I mean, to speak to the people, that's the first time they mention. So what keeps us away from starting to introduce digital biomarkers in the routine checkup, the annual checkup, starting with 45 or something like that? Are we there? Can we today, like in cholesterol and statins, can we already sort of routinely apply these biomarkers, or how much validation do we still need to do? Because at the end of the day, I mean, I was recently talking to my cardiologist, and he said the impact statins had on heart disease is just absolutely incredible. There are millions of people saved every year. So what needs to happen in order to bring this forward?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we're a little bit tied to, again, was what I referred to as this concept of digital biomarkers, more in the realm of how we think about traditional biomarkers. And I think that that's holding us back. I actually think if we're going to get to this idea that we can bring this into clinical care, we're going to have to do this with high, accuracy, right? Diagnostic or prognostic accuracy. And the reason we're having trouble getting there is because of the heterogeneity of the symptoms that we're following. So I actually think that what's holding us back is that we need to think about a new class of digital biomarkers that's really going to meet the clinical threshold of accurate early detection. And the reality is it's not going to be one device, one application, one algorithm. That's just not going to get us there. For me, in my mind, I think it's going to be a mix of different sensor data that's going to come together in very dynamic and fluid and really constantly changing mixes of signal that reflects the known heterogeneity of the cognitive, behavioral, and functional symptoms. But nonetheless, when seen in the gestalt, will provide a true representation of change that's highly accurate. And I think that that's a reality that we're going to have to understand, embrace, and then work together. So I think, certainly within the US, the FDA needs to help lead that call. And then I think that then with them sort of showing that leadership, I think then the public and private side of this will then start to follow their lead.